Hello gang, so in that last video I talked about arrays a little bit and array methods, and I showed you what I think is the most elegant way to work with arrays and loops in JavaScript. It's the way I do it every single time. If I want to make a bunch of balls, I'll use array.from. If I want to transform a bunch of balls, I'll use array.map. If I want to create some kind of output, whether it's to the console or to the document, the screen, I'll use for each. If I want to return a new array, I'll use map. If I don't want to return a new array, I'll use for each. There's other methods that are really great too, like reduce, and maybe I'll make videos about those in the future. There's filter if we want to grab specific items. But in this video, what I want to do is talk about how that works. And to understand that, we need to actually create an array. We're going to make our own array class. So I'm going to ask you to hold on to your hats, because this one is going to be kind of fun. And, before I do this, let me just make a new file. And I'm just going to call it array.js. And we'll do this in there. So we'll say, we'll call it MyArray. And so we're going to make a class. It's going to be exactly what the array implementation. It's going to be a lot like what the array implementation actually is. And the array implementation has a property called length. We know that if we make an array called and we give it some values, we can console.log the length of that array and get the actual length. And so the length of this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's a very useful key. Every array has this property called length. And when we start out, if we don't fill it with anything, it'll have a length of 0. And we can store the data for our object in an object. And we can again start that out as not having any values. If we want to add something to our array, we can give that array a push method that'll take in a value, and it'll say this dot data at this dot length equals value. Let's see if we can get this to work. So I'm gonna go to this index.html, and I'm actually going to change this to the file that I'm using, which is array.js. And I'm going to come in here, and let's come back to our browser and give our a cool title. We see the length of that is 4. We get rid of this, and I'm gonna now say const r equals new my array, and let's console.log r. So you can see we have this thing now. And if I want to say r.push nyancat, we can console.log r after that, and we'll see it's got some data. But I forgot one thing, which is to increment the length. So what I need to do is in this push, I need to say this dot length plus plus. Let's take a look. So now the length is 1, and we have this data, and that's correct. So I can say dot length. Look at that. So those are all working correctly. I've got the basis for an array. And we could go through, and I recommend to you maybe try it out. See if you can implement a pop method, or another array method. But what I want to do is implement this map method so you understand what these higher order array methods are doing. These array methods where we're passing in a function. It's a really nifty thing, and I wish someone had explained it to me when I was starting out, because I think it would have helped me really understand. So what we're going to do in this method is we're going to pass in a function. And this function, we're going to call this function, and we're going to pass in a couple of values. We're going to pass in an item and an index. So we're calling this function from within map. When we call r.map, so I'm gonna do it. We're gonna say const. Let's say numbers equals r.map, and we're gonna pass in a function that's gonna take in strings and index and return the index. So this is gonna get back from here an index number. We're gonna fill up this array with some strings, and we're going to turn it into numbers by returning this index. Now, we're passing a function in, and we can actually call that a callback function. And we'll say const cb equals this function. So we can pass that function in there to see better. We're passing this function in. Now, where's it getting these values? It's getting these values when it's invoked. We pass the item and the index in from map, and we do that in a for loop. And we're going to pass in, we'll say this.data at I and I. And now if we console.log numbers, undefined 34. Looks like I made a mistake. Numbers equals, and the mistake is I forgot to return from the map function the new array. So I need to not only call this function, but I need to create a function, say const r, and we'll say r at I equals that, and we'll return r. Let's see what we get. Oops, mission initializer and const declaration at 18. Oh, there we go. And there we go. So now we transformed those values, those string values, into the indexes that they're located in it. But we can change this. Let's get rid of that index, and we'll say instead of strings, let's just do string, and we're going to return string plus, we're going to return hi plus string. Oops, that's an equal sign. And let's take a look now. Hi Nyan Cat, hi Unicorn, hi Dog. Let's add a. There we go. So now we're transforming that. We've got this map method working, and you can see what's happening inside that map method. And this is true in the for each and all these array methods, is we pass a function in, and we invoke that function inside of the method, passing in this data that we're getting from the array. So I hope that helps clear that up. I don't know if it does or not, but you got to try. And over time, these things will all make more sense. In the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about event listeners, which is another example of passing a callback function in. And what these event listeners are going to allow us to do is actually, when we have things on the screen, we can listen for clicks. So I'll see you